A pay raise for lawmakers, the gas tax holiday, bills that previously passed but haven't yet been signed or vetoed. There is a lot to talk about that is front and center at the state capitol in Albany as we take a live look for you here tonight. Jack O'Donnell, a prominent lobbyist who covers the whole state but mostly based here in Buffalo, put out this newsletter this morning and titled it Crunch Time. He noted that as of a week ago, the governor still had 265 bills that she either needed to sign into law or veto. And of course, the clock is ticking until the new year. The governor, meanwhile, is also working on a state budget proposal with a promise of, quote, no new taxes. Meanwhile, take a look at the calendar. Hochul gets inaugurated the first day of the new year, quickly followed by the beginning of the new legislative session. Her State of the State address is on January 10th. The executive budget due shortly thereafter on February 1st. You technically are supposed to have a budget deal done, and the deadline that often gets missed, that's April 1st. And then the last day of the session is supposed to be June 8th. Before any of that happens, there's also talk about a potential special session before the end of this year. The aforementioned Jack O'Donnell joins us live here tonight, managing partner of O'Donnell and Associates, lobbying and government affairs firm. Jack, we appreciate you coming in. When I read your newsletter this morning, I was like, man, there are a lot of storylines going on right now. And I want to start with the one that's maybe most timely, and that's this potential special session. If lawmakers are going to give themselves a pay raise, and if they want it to take effect by next year, they have to do a special session, just kind of the way it works. Also, this gas tax is automatically set to expire at the end of the month, the relief portion from the state. Do you think there's going to be a special session to deal with those issues or any others?
I do. I can tell you right now as we speak, the New York State Assembly majority is in a Zoom or a remote conference to talk about this. But they're talking about coming back on Thursday and voting for that pay raise. If they want to do that without what's called a message of necessity, where the governor waives any waiting period, they have to introduce that bill tonight. So I think we'll see it close to midnight.
Jack, before we move on to the next question here, and we talk about the gas tax relief, is there any chance, because a lot of our viewers are watching right now, and that is scheduled to end, the state portion of it, by the end of this year. Obviously, gas prices are still higher than a lot of people where they would like them to be. Any chance that gets looped into this, or does it seem like it's just lawmaker pay raises?
I think it's going to be pay raise, but also some restrictions on outside income, some other limits on what legislators can do. I'd be very surprised to see the gas tax make it. In Albany, we've heard some concern that some of that tax was not passed on to taxpayers, right, or gas buyers. But also, it was expensive. A lot of that money in those taxes goes to roads and bridge repairs and some other funds, and the state used some federal money to kind of keep those groups whole. So there's a lot that goes into this, and I'd be surprised to see that get done by Thursday.
We mentioned that there are a lot of bills that passed in the legislature already earlier this year. The governor gets to either sign them into law or veto them, has until the end of the year. Listen to how she described her decision-making process on all that.
I pressure test everything I sign or everything I veto. There's been a lot of analysis that goes behind it. So there are some difficult bills that are before us right now, and we're looking at all of them very carefully.
So, Jack, what are some of those high-profile bills that we're still waiting on?
Look, one of the biggest is something called the Right to Repair Act. This would be a big deal. New York State would be the first to institute this. It would mean that Apple would have to allow you to be able to go to a store to fix your iPhone. If you do that now, you're voiding the warranty. And not just Apple, right, but a lot of other companies, and they've said that the details of that are proprietary and they shouldn't have to share them. But this is a real pro-consumer bill. This is one of the big ones. There's some legislation around zero-emission vehicles, and actually, we've heard a lot of guidelines or plans from the state, but this would actually set how soon and what it would look like for the state to transition the state fleet, which is thousands of vehicles, to zero emission. There are a number of bills around different reporting and who's required to report different things. There's also one on contractor registration that we've been working on that is sort of a big deal. But there are still, as of today, over 250 pieces of legislation that have not made it to the governor's desk yet.
Yeah, that's a lot of them. We'll continue to follow that. The governor really sets the tone for what happens during any legislative session in Albany. What should we expect from the governor's State of the State address, which people will note will be her first as an elected governor?
Yeah, the governor will be driving the agenda here, and I think we've already heard some teases of that, right? She talked about no new taxes in a state like New York. That's a really big deal, and she's going to have to work hard to maintain it. We've already heard from some groups of legislators from New York City saying time to raise taxes on the wealthy, and seeing what that looks like. We're expected to hear a lot from the governor about housing. There's not enough housing and issues like good cause eviction and what that means for people. A lot of the other bills that are frankly coming due from the pandemic, mental health, some of those kinds of issues we expect to hear from her. And then what's going to be really contentious is we heard from her during the campaign about fighting crime and about what that looks like. Another tweak or change to bail reform. That's going to be strongly resisted by the state legislature. So we're going to have a fight on that.
Interesting stuff. And I'm out of time, Jack, but just real fast. So by tonight, because they'll have to file the bills, if we're going to have a special session, we'll probably know tonight or in the morning.
If they're going to vote on Thursday, yes, we'll see that bill before midnight tonight.
All right. Jack O'Donnell, managing partner of O'Donnell and Associates. Appreciate you coming in. There's a lot to all this. We have a better understanding now. Thank you.